Brian Cox and his co-host of the Infinite Monkey Cage, Robin Ince, live at 3 Arena. Tickets on sale now. Additional charges may apply.
You thought it was a one-day deal, a week at most, but you were wrong. The Black Friday event is now on at appliancesdelivered.ie, and the savings are epic. TVs from just $99.95, up to 40% off washing machines, up to 20% off dishwashers, and up to 25% off refrigeration. Savings even more epic than my voiceover. The Black Friday event, now with more incredible deals added at appliancesdelivered.ie.
What would you do with a Mini in 48 hours? You could go from Mallinhead to Misenhead, from Dingle to Donegal. You could use it as a runaround for the kids, hit some waves out west, or wander into work in new wheels. With the Mini 191 48-hour test drive, what you do is up to you. Just bring it back in 48 hours. It won't be easy. To book your Mini 191 48-hour test drive, visit mini.ie or drop into your local Mini retailer. Terms and conditions apply.
Beacon South Quarter, Ireland's premier interiors destination, is home to French Roche Bobois, Soul, the spirit of ultimate lifestyle, Cube Kitchens and Caligaris, Danish designs by Beau Concept and Red Earth and Mindy Browns. We have an extensive range of furnishings and accessories, and all our stores have qualified interior designers too. Visit beaconsouthquarter.ie and follow us on Facebook for offers. We're located beside exit 13 off the M50 with 2 hours free parking.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Now, you're very welcome back. So we're reviewing the Sunday Papers. As ever, we are streaming live on Facebook and on all our social channels, and we're just here on the wireless as well if you want to listen in for the next hour. We have Ryle Nugent, formerly head of sport at RTE, and now you would have seen yesterday commentating with Channel 4 as well. Ryle, you're very welcome to the paper review. It's good to have you with us. And Brendan O'Brien of the Irish Examiner, an old hand at this sort of thing. So back pages are what you might imagine. Sunday World here first up. Green Giants, a picture of Stockdale going over last night, and the team sprinting over to celebrate with him. Heroes all, as Peter the Great leads brilliant Ireland to historic first home win over All Blacks, is their back page. Sun Sport, let's Joe ape Smith. So this is All Blacks coach Steve Hansen saying Ireland are favourites for next year's World Cup and that we have to try and ape the Irish now in many respects. Johnny and Jacob bashed the All Blacks. Picture there of Jacob Stockdale going over. And there's also a story on the bet that Sturridge made. He's facing a potential ban. There's an accusation that a bet was placed, not by Sturridge himself, but there was a bet of €10,000 placed on him moving to Inter Milan in January. And then there was another bet on him joining West Brom. So that's what's on the back page of the Sun. The Mail on Sunday then, stock rising. It's a picture of Jacob Stockdale. Brilliant picture of Rob Kearney underneath him, staring over at the referee to make sure that Wayne Barnes is going to award the try, and Stockdale realising he has scored it. Ireland put down massive marker ahead of next year's World Cup with first home win over the All Blacks is their back page. And then a picture of Martin O'Neill down low. It's a real contrast, isn't it, between the football teams and the rugby teams at the moment. Kevin Kilban here, this Ireland team does not look a happy bunch. Back of the Sunday Mirror then, the best, bar none. Our boys win now for the World Cup. Picture of Luke McGrath jumping into the arms of Keith Earls. And then we have the Star. Wallop. Super Stockdale sinks the Kiwis. And Ireland 16, New Zealand 9. And then a portion of rice is over on the left-hand side. So it seems that Jose is one of several now interested in signing Declan Rice. And then final two here, Sunday Independent. They've gone with the picture of the Irish team looking at the All Blacks performing the haka. Green Giants, Ireland 16, New Zealand 9. Schmidt delight as Ireland lay down World Cup marker. And Sexton is a world beater, says Joe. Where Keane Tracy writes, Joe Schmidt's shot stopped short of insisting that Johnny Sexton should be crowned World Rugby's Player of the Year at the end of the month. But he did hammer home just how important the out half is to Ireland. And then, brilliant picture in the Sunday Times. Pretty much the whole front page, really, bar very short byline at the bottom. Oh, what a night. Dublin goes wild as brave Ireland seal historic victory over the All Blacks. So, they are your back pages. Ryle Nugent, you've timed your debut on the Sunday Papers. Immaculately. You were commentating for Channel 4. Did you get to take much in? I spoke to Dave McIntyre, who will say that he will do a match, and then sometimes his dad or friend will say, what did you think of X or what did you think of Y? And even though he's commentated on that very moment, he hasn't taken it in the way he would if he was just watching at home.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Completely blank out.
You don't take it in. You need to go back and watch it for the pure enjoyment of it. I mean,
the enjoyment of hearing yourself, surely.
No. Yeah, exactly. No, I think I agree with Dave. I think you're like, at the risk, it's a terrific job, but you're there to do a job, and your job is to try and to see it through the audience's eyes, and to grab a hold of the emotion and to ride the wave, whether that's positive or negative, and how positive it was last night. But in terms of enjoying it for the spectacle that it is, I never do until the next day. Enjoy the moment, enjoy the event, enjoy the job of doing what I do, but enjoying it in the way I think everybody else enjoys it, no. And I think anybody, whether they're writing or broadcasting or whatever, is there to do a job. They love being there, they love the event, but they don't love it in the way that the audience that they're either broadcasting to or reading, that's reading their work, is loving it.
It can be a tricky one to try and cover such an obvious story here for all the paper journalists, because I mean it's so obvious it was a brilliant night, and then you can almost be over enthusiastic and words like heroes get thrown around, and sometimes you wonder if that's appropriate for a bunch of lads being paid to play rugby, but you get the sentiment. So what's jumping out at you about the coverage today then? Who have you gone for?
There's, like you said, there's a lot of very different angles on it. You talk about how difficult it is for a print journalist, and as a daily journalist we get a little kind of masochistic pleasure in our Sunday colleagues being put up to the pin of their collar on a Saturday night. It's like they can do it for one night and we can sit back and actually take it in. So like you're talking about, Ryle, I had a little bit of leeway. I was able to sit back and take it in a little bit better. I wasn't really doing anything until the after-match pressers and mix zone, so that was lovely for me. And we were talking earlier about how brilliant it was and how great an occasion it can be for cynical hacks. And that's the way it was last night, just because it was a Saturday night. So you look at Sunday papers and there's a great mix. There's player profiles. I suppose in terms of the player profiles, the most obvious one, Peter O'Reilly has done a little one on Bundy Aki, who was obviously the centre of attention, and forgive the pun, during the week when the All Black coach Ian Foster came out and said he looks like an Irishman, which was a very tasteless dig, I thought. I was actually at that press conference, so that's an obvious one. James Ryan obviously gets a couple of hits as well, and Dennis Walsh looked at Kieran Marmion, who's obviously another obvious focus for people last night, seeing as he was fitting in for Conor Murray. That apart, I mean, like you say, Joe, it's very difficult. A lot of people have gone for just a kind of an overview, and its initial impressions. It's very hard to get a feel on it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's so soon and so sudden.
It's rare. I feel a certain amount of sympathy for the written guys, but I do. I think it's from a broadcast perspective, whether it's TV or radio, you get to react in the moment. These guys have got to have their positions thought out and yet delivered on a final whistle deadline, and it is very, very hard to do the job of analysing forensically, which is what you kind of go to the Sunday papers for normally, for them to do that when the deadline was probably 9:10 last night and the game finished at 9 o'clock. So like I think it's a really, really interesting read across all the papers. I think the Marmion pieces are particularly interesting. You know what stood out for me? I can't help it. I don't know whether I don't know what it is about either my psyche or the Irish psyche, but you tend to go abroad first, and there are fantastic journalists here, but when you're looking at it from a international perspective, you wonder, what do they think about us? What are they saying about us? And I was immediately drawn to Stephen Jones in the Sunday Times, and Stephen Jones hold the front page. It seems to be absolutely in love with this Irish performance. Ireland Rugby took the Rugby Globe and set it spinning in an awestruck Dublin last night. They took notions of All Black infallibility and tore them to shreds. It doesn't come any more comprehensively down on the Irish side from Stephen Jones than it did last night. And the piece in general is gushing. Sounds like it's some way green tinted. It's objectively gushing, if you understand my meaning. And that's a really good read.
Yeah, he says,
I you know what I really
says they were better by way more than 7 points.
Yeah,
they beasted New Zealand up front. the giant Tyke Furlong, who he loves, by the way. I mean, by the way, Stephen Jones, I've lost count of how many times on the Sunday paper review now people have said, well, Stephen Jones is actually being nice about Ireland or Irish teams. He's nice all the time, actually, about Irish teams.
Just a reputation.
For a long time.
Some of us have a long memory.
I know,
of watching Stephen have a go. And you know what? And fairly, the point is interesting. You talk about the words that are being thrown around, like hero and magnificent and world beaters and all these words. I thought last night was magnificent. I think the two results over the All Blacks in the last 2 years have been magnificent. They are historical in the true sense of the word. But Ireland have gone to World Cups on crests of waves before, and we had the golden generation that couldn't fail, and there have been so many false dawns, and the World Cup is now the pinnacle. There was a question of whether it would ever be the pinnacle of rugby, but I think now it is the pinnacle of where you stand in the world game, and they haven't delivered at that. And I think the success of last night will ultimately be measured by what happens 12 months from now.
It will dictate it,
It will dictate it, and I think it's easy for us all to go, Matt, I've seen this happen before, where there have been big results, where we've beaten England before, where we were never supposed to win Grand Slams, and we've all taken part in it. This isn't a finger-pointing exercise. I've been on the mic for many of those games, and I've ridden that emotional wave. But I think there is something about this morning where I feel that was wonderful. It was historic. But what will account for if Ireland, for whatever reason, get knocked out in the quarter-final of the World Cup again, albeit by a South Africa or a New Zealand? And I'm not sure that isn't in the back of everybody's mind. I've no doubt it's in the back of the players' and the coach's mind.
It's almost a shame that even immediately after the game last night, everything was framed in terms of the World Cup. I can totally understand it. It's obvious from a journalistic point of view you have to do it, but it just struck me, can we just start here for a moment and just let this sink in for a minute? It just, everything was framed in the World Cup. But there's definitely, you talk with the foreign press as well, Ryle, the amount of English heavy-hitting rugby journalists there last night was amazing. When you consider England were playing in Twickenham. I know it was only Japan, but it's just a sign of it. I was actually covering the All Blacks pretty much all week out in Blanchardstown, and there was definitely a sense from the media there, this paradigm has changed. You could see that with them. The Irish are a serious threat. We see it in the New Zealand Herald again, like in the game of the best came out on top, and the best were Ireland. The
New Zealand, Gregor Paul says Ireland can now claim to be the best team in the world. Thankfully there's no sense of a refereeing decision or any controversy, or there's just a sense of actually the best team won.
There were one or two calls, I think, that were being questioned. Rob Kearney's tackle in the last 10 minutes when he went in the air. Was it on Mackenzie? I think it was on Mackenzie. I think
it was. On the flip side, before half-time, there was a glut of penalties given away by New Zealand.
Sam Whitelock kind of balanced it out.
That balanced it out.
Like, Eamon Sweeney makes an interesting point. I guess it ties in what you're saying about how much can we believe in this as a statement for the World Cup, because he says Chicago seems small potatoes compared to this one. This time around, the All Blacks were forewarned, and nobody could claim this wasn't an important fixture for them. This was going to be a world heavyweight title bout. And you got that sense this week that whatever Chicago was, it was kind of a strange atmosphere in some ways. It was a bit of a jolly. I mean, they were missing their second row. Obviously, there was no sense this week that it was anything but your best against our best, and we're taking this as seriously as we could. And maybe that's why we're slightly believing in this.
Yeah, I think
that's more.
I think that's a very fair point.
I do
totally. And I think when you're putting it in context as well, Brendan Fanning has a piece in the Sunday Indo as well, and he takes it back to England in 2003, and that time they went down to the Southern Hemisphere before the World Cup, and how integral that was to what it is they did in Sydney with Wilkinson's drop goal winning the final.
Bernard Jackman did that, and I think there is definitely a comparable there.
Undoubtedly.
It's the before Ireland have gone to World Cups with a group of what everybody believed were talented players and capable coaches, but they hadn't really done it prior to going, and everybody was expecting and hoping and had convinced themselves it was just going to happen without really the concrete base there to prove that it could. And I think what's different this time is there is now definitively a foundation, a very, very strong foundation, and here's hoping that'll play out. Just back to Stephen Jones. It was he that did the man of the match, or the player ratings, I should say, for the Sunday Times, and I was just taken by his line on Peter O'Mahony, who he gave 9 out of 10. Frankly, he looks exhausted when he takes the field at the start of a game, but totally dominated the All Blacks throughout, and it's so true. O'Mahony, he was special last night. I mean, you run out of superlatives for Peter O'Mahony, but I can think of very few more brave players. He seems to have no default setting for his own preservation anywhere, and he was at it again last night. One note of caution, and it's interesting, you know, Devon Toner is lauded, and rightly so, throughout the media coverage of this. Here's one for you. I think everybody remembers the time when Ireland were based around Mike Ross and his fitness about whether the Irish scrum was going to function or not. Last week against Argentina without Devon Toner, the line-out malfunctioned, misfired. This week it was corrected until, and Ireland could have rued the last 15 minutes with 2 line-outs inside the New Zealand 22. No Devon Toner, and crucially no Peter O'Mahony either, who's a line-out option. And they stuttered. Now, it didn't happen. It wasn't a 2013 repeat. Brendan Fanning really good and strong on that piece about going back to, it was almost a play out of what happened in 2013. And there's the difference. We saw it through, whereas before they found a way of getting it done. But a reliance, and I'm not suggesting that there's an over-reliance on Devon Toner, but what I am saying is I think there's enough there that Joe Schmidt will be, as we know he will, forensically examine that and go, where to from here? Because Toner has become, and talk about a guy who's reinvented himself and got the very best out of his abilities. There is a reliance on him, and that, if that was questionable last week in Argentina, for me that was hammered home yesterday.
He got an unbelievable standing ovation afterwards. Never more have we cheered a line-out operator for his work. It's interesting, funny you mentioned on Marmion. So Dennis Walsh on page 4 of the Sunday Times does a big piece on Marmion. His selection may have surprised some, but his performance showed that Joe Schmidt got it right. And he talks about a point in the game where Marmion was electric. Box kicking had been poor, but the next box kick was his best of the game. It hung over Dane McKenzie, just long enough for Rob Kearney to claim it deep inside the 22. A couple of minutes later, the ball squirted loose from an Irish ruck on halfway, and Marmion pounced on it quick as fire. And he talks about the reception he gets as well. Just before the hour mark, Aaron Smith, the New Zealand 9, had left the field 2 minutes earlier. And though it might have been just an accident of the clock, the sequence was fitting. Marmion had won his personal battle against one of the best scrum halves in the world. So if you're Kieran Marmion and you've bought the Sunday Times today, you're thinking, I did okay.
Hold on a second. Sunday Independent and read Neil Francis.
Frano, who's obviously, I mean, look, he's talking about how the World Cup's a realistic objective, not to misrepresent his piece. There's lots of compliments in there, but he's given his opinion relentlessly, which is always a good thing, I think, especially when everything's going so well. I do not wish to strike a mean blow after such a magnificent team performance, but I cannot understand why Marmion was picked to start. His box kicking and his passing are just not at this level, is a point that he makes.
We were talking about, I asked Ryle his opinion on it outside about Marmion, and his box kicking, we actually have the perfect view, anybody in either stand along the side of the pitch. The arc on his box kicking is so different to Murray's. Murray's just goes up and it comes down, and there's more of a dome effect so it's a different kick, which invites a different tactical approach by Ireland. You need a different kind of kick chase for that. I thought whether it was the kicking or the kick chase yesterday, I thought that was an issue. I don't think he was that bad. We were saying this outside. I thought his passing was fine. I thought he did very well. He was stepping into huge shoes.
He defensively he was so strong. I thought his passing was good. I thought his tempo was good. Look, if you're going to replace the best player in the world in his position, and I think Conor Murray, along with Smith and Pereira, are the three. You're going to replace the best in the world. There is going to be a gap, and there should be a gap. But was the gap so significant that if we were playing in a World Cup semi-final or quarter-final and Kieran Marmion was called upon, like last night proved, he can operate at that level for me.
I think the general point as well, we talked at the start about how do the papers, digest all this, and how does a Sunday journalist digest all this, and the varying opinions. The Marmion one is one, and some guys have talked about this being a complete performance. Others have said already, even last night on Twitter, the great thing about this performance is it can clearly get better. I mean, the point midway through the second half was completely harm-scarum. And you could see that Ireland were in danger of losing control of it, I thought. And it could go either way, and you're thinking just kick to touch and get a little bit of possession. And so there's clearly improvements can be made. I mean, the line out is malfunctioning at the end of it. Little things. I think that's a great thing about it.
Yeah. Well, New Zealand had territory for about 20 minutes of the second half.
Yeah,
I mean,
there was no way Ireland
slow clock at that point.
Yeah. But you're talking about, superheroes and all this kind of stuff, and Roy Curtis actually goes full on superhero in the Sunday World, and he says, talking about Peter O'Mahony, when he limped off, spent. Entering the last quarter, the acclaim could be heard on his home planet in that distant galaxy of superheroes.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's just fan the flames, lads. Go on.
And Frano's line, the trouble with superheroes is what do they do between telephone boxes?
That's a great
line.
I think
that's a great line.
Really, really good.
Yeah, really good. It's interesting as well, David Walsh, I mean, you talked again about the British media, and David, of course, being one of being an Irishman, but the chief sports writer for the Times, and himself and Stephen Jones were sent over. So McCleary there as well yesterday, and David's take on it is how that changed landscape since the game. He quotes Donald Spring for Alan English in Stand Up and Fight in that book. He said, when Donald Spring said, "Since the game turned professional, we are the most professional in the world. But when we were amateur, we were the most amateur." And David's take is that's not far from the truth. And so in this new world, Ireland came to face down the All Blacks, driven not just by hope, but by clear-headed belief. And that, I think, probably sums it up.
Yeah, it's true. What Neil Francis says about the final moments, I guess, kind of captures the overall sense I took from the game as well, more than anything. So he talks about the Mo'unga pass into Retallick, and he says, the New Zealand lock would catch such a pass 99 times out of 100, but they keep telling us that skills break down under pressure. And despite a dominant performance in New Zealand's line-out in the second half, Retallick looked frazzled. Maybe he was thinking 3 or 4 phases ahead, as the All Blacks would normally do as they go chasing the game, but he had failed to deal with the here and now. That was a consequence of the previous 80 minutes inflicted by an Irish side that never let up and put them under the sort of pressure which they don't even experience playing against the Springboks in South Africa. And it did just feel like of pressure all the way through. Like the intensity was insane, the tackle count was insane, and even a few players have touched here and there on the decision to take a few steps forward at the start of the haka.
Yeah.
Look, these kind of things look foolish when they don't come off, of course they do. But it was typical of the mindset, and definitely heard a few whispers that the physicality of the game 2 years ago, post-Chicago in Dublin, we saw Robbie Henshaw stretch it off and other things, had not sat well with this camp for a long time. That this had been discussed.
It's very interesting because Steve Hansen was asked in a presser last night about the errors. He brought them up. He addressed the gathering first, and he said, first of all, congratulations to Ireland, blah, blah, blah. But he made, a very concerted effort to say, we did this wrong, we did that wrong. He called the discipline in the first half dumb. We're going to have to give ourselves an uppercut about that one, is what he said. He was asked specifically then later, is that all down to Ireland's pressure? And he says, no, it's not. When it clearly is. And it's just this almost begrudging attitude. It was the same actually after Chicago. People always remember after Chicago, he was so classy, was the word I remember seeing. And then if you look back through the clips as time went on, by the time he got to Dublin 2 weeks later, it was, we did this wrong, mate, we did that wrong, mate, we did this, penalties and unforced errors. 4 months later, he was still talking about we were missing Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock in Chicago. And that I wrote about this during the week. I never got the sense of him that he rated this Irish team as their equals. It was nearly kind of, who are these guys? This is Ireland.
I did a piece with John Sexton for the television last night during the week, and I asked him, I said, I had a sense that they All Blacks had come to town with a bit more respect, and Johnny just went silent, and there was this silence in the room, really uncomfortable silence, because you never know with Johnny where his head space might be. And he said, you think so? And I said, yeah. And he said, so from a base of 0, they might have some respect for us, but the only way they're going to have respect for us is if we beat them. I just go back to Hansen and kind of stirred the pot with the Bundy Aki. Well, with the All Blacks in general, kind of felt like they were stirring the pot. And it's referred to by Shane McGrath in the Irish Mail on Sunday. He said, as a native New Zealander, his status as an Irish player was now an inevitable topic. He sung a Rá Navíon, and if that can be easily dismissed by his critics, leading the Irish defiance of the haka illustrated his place in the team. After those theatrics and just before the match started, the Irish players warmed up with tackle bags. They did a drill where a replacement held a bag and a teammate tackled it. Aki nearly drove Ian Henderson into the dodder with the force of his enthusiasm.
See, I'm going to be the grump on this and say, well, Bundy Aki is nothing short of a brilliant person. And he's doing a phenomenal job, and he could not be more invested in Team Ireland. But I mean, I'd still have the residual lack of comfort with somebody born in any sport, born in their native country, playing against their native country, with no ties as such beyond just living here for a number of years. Like rugby needs to clean it up. I know it's trying to.
100% agree with you.
But I don't want it to become about Aki.
No.
If you get me. It's not fair on him.
No, it's not fair on him. But for what it's worth, I 100% agree with you. I think that the laws around eligibility have been far, far too loose. I would go further than the 5 years that are now being proposed. I think it should be a lot longer. I think you've got to draw a line, and I think everybody does draw a line between a Joey Carberry born in New Zealand comes to Ireland at the age of 10, or a Ronan O'Gara born in Canada and comes, no one's questioning that, and nor would you on the other side of the fence. But the residency thing, I think, has made a mockery of it in some ways, and this is not about Bundy Aki and should not be about him. It's utterly unfair that it would be. But it does draw it into focus. But and 5 years for me isn't enough. Is it for you?
I think it's I think it's fair enough. I thought 3. I agree with both of you guys. I think international sport is international sport in terms of there are grey areas, but let's keep it as
black
and white as it can be. 5 years, I think, look, whether it's the right or wrong thing, it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the direction. But I think if you're going to step in the right direction, then don't step in it, stand over it.
These are sporting bodies we're talking about.
Who you
they have to be pulled and dragged in the right direction the rest of the time. So.
Sure, absolutely. You know what's easily forgotten sometimes is just in a newspaper, it's just a straight graphic piece that gives you an idea. And in the Mail and Sunday End, the Hugh Farley piece, like how tight was that game last night? Just go and look at the match facts that are straight in front of you. Tackles 156 for Ireland, 157 for New Zealand. 20 missed tackles both sides. Carries 151 against 162. Clean line breaks 5 apiece. For me, there's only one stat that stands out of the maybe there are 9 or 10 there. The possession territory, almost 50-50. But at the back end, the very last one, penalties conceded. Ireland 5, New Zealand 11.
Yeah.
For 2 teams that went into this game with an average penalty concession of 8 penalties per game, Ireland through the Six Nations, New Zealand through the Rugby Championship. And it went 11-5. And everybody was talking about it being one in the tight 5 and it being one... It came down to discipline, and that discipline allowed Ireland to take the 9-6 lead and then to build on that. And I think that piece, that simple graphic at the back page of the Mail and Sunday gives you everything that you need to know about last.
4 penalties conceded in Chicago, was it?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, their penalty count generally is quite ridiculous. Yeah. Because there was even a moment in the first half where I think it was Ringrose, but he was across the offside line and he just got down his hunkers and didn't move, just played dead. And Wayne Barnes made a point of saying, that was excellent. You're best boy in the class at this. You're really going above and beyond. And they won a penalty just about 20-30 seconds later. And I just thought they're painting great pictures for the referee because they were very conscious of Barnes during the.
You know what, referees?
I know they stuck to the process. I felt.
Do you know what? I'm gonna wait to have my head chopped off by both of you. But I actually do, and there isn't a huge amount. And how could they get to it? But I think Wayne Barnes did a good job last night.
Well, Stephen Jones says he refereed it beautifully.
Did he say that?
Yes.
I thought like they're never going to get everything right. Whatever field they're on and whatever sport they're covering. I don't know why anybody chooses to referee. I simply do not understand it. We see everything that's going on around in different games at underage. I see it myself with my kids on side. I don't know why referees do it. But at the top level, for Wayne Barnes to go out last night under very difficult circumstances, taking a little bit of jip from both camps in terms of how he referee. And I thought last night. He did a really solid job under the circumstances.
Were New Zealand just lying all over the rucks at times?
Oh, sure, they were like.
I mean, does it not stand to the referee then? First ruck, 15 seconds in, ping, ping, ping.
But again, I think you can follow that through. I think if the Rob Kearney incident, what was that? 15 minutes before the end, was it? 20 minutes, 15 minutes before the end. If that incident where Rob collides with Mackenzie happens in the first 10 minutes, I think Rob Kearney's in the sin bin. I genuinely believe that because it sets a tone. I think Wayne Barnes had an empathy for the game last night where he thought it wasn't particularly dirty. Was it brutal and physical? Unequivocally it was, but was there that physical edge or nastiness that was there in the second game in 2016? I don't think there was. Johnny Sexton hit a high tackle and was rightly pinged for it. Rob Kearney could have been, and New Zealand probably should have had a guy sent to the sin bin.
Well, on that point, Matt Williams had a tweet that I presume Matt's 100% on the ball on this, although Andy Dunn, who's in later, did write back to him saying, is that true? So in 2014, the average number of penalties South Africa had before a yellow was sent was 11. The average number of penalties Australia gave away before a yellow was given was 12. The average number of penalties New Zealand gave away before a yellow was given was 43.
You're kidding.
Yeah. And there was that sense of a reluctance last night. Like even Wayne Barnes did say to Rory Best at one point, look, I've said to him the next one, but we're on the stroke of half time, and they'd held out the onslaught at that stage.
2 times that Ireland were over.
So you're kind of thinking for Rory Best, look, that's great and everything, but how many times can you expect us to keep being on the cusp of a try? You know,
so that's so true.
They're wonderfully cynical in their own way. Is there any last thoughts on the rugby or on the coverage anyone wants to give, and we'll take a break and move on? I mean, it's everywhere, obviously. You want
it's absolutely.
If you want to bask in it, you can.
Well, and I think you should.
Yeah. Well, even the photos are fantastic. Yeah. Like the Hugh Farley's piece here, the photo alongside it is brilliant because it was very noticeable when Stockdale went over. The team, who were probably wrecked, got this surge of collective adrenaline and sprinted all over him. You know, they made a beeline for him, and they've captured it from the other side as the players are all rushing over. It's great. Sometimes the photos are the best thing about the next day.
Maybe round off by going back to where you started on Joe Schmidt on Sexton, which is on the front page of the Indo. About where does the World Player of the Year? I mean, do these things matter? I don't know. I think if you're Johnny Sexton, it does matter.
Hugely.
You want to be recognised as being the best player in the world. And after last night, I don't see how they get away from him. Now we've seen judges in all sorts of
O'Driscoll in 09 jumps out as a really...
Every time an All-Star gets awarded or a World Player
you missed the RTE Sport of the Year awards, do you? Yeah. They're a cakewalk.
That's somebody else's headache. That is like,
but he must really... I mean, Keith Wood is the only Irish one as things stand, and you would think... I mean, even Stephen Jones, actually, God, we're quoting Stephen Jones a lot, but even he says Bowden Barrett doesn't know how to control a game like Johnny Sexton. Sexton was immense, all that kind of stuff. So
Steve Hansen was talking about that this morning at their press conference, an evolution in how they play the game, and they're looking to play with more playmakers, which is why Damien McKenzie is in at full back. And he didn't elaborate on it too much, but he's clearly given the impression that they need to do better in, like you say, playing the game and controlling the game.
Yeah. They took that away from the Lions tour, I think, as well, that pressure rugby. So we're reviewing the Sunday papers here with Brendan O'Brien from the Irish Examiner and Ryle Nugent. The paper review brought to you with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. And as we go to an ad break, it is with a heavy heart that I report that Wishi Fogarty has passed away at the age of 77. It's very sad news. He passed away this morning. Killarney Legion have put out a statement. So they say they were deeply saddened to learn this morning of the passing of club member Wishi Fogarty, born March 1941. Wishi was, of course, known throughout the country for his work with Radio Kerry Terrace Talk, which featured audio interviews with some of Ireland's greatest sporting legends and personalities. Wishi was awarded a McNamee Award in 2004, and he was inducted to the McNamee Hall of Fame in 2016. And they say the word legend sometimes overused, but Wishi Fogarty was a club legend, and his passing leaves a huge void in our club, and they extend their deepest sympathies to his family. Funeral details to follow. So he was on the show here plenty of times, an absolute gent and a fantastic broadcaster. So that's very, very sad news this morning. Wishi Fogarty passing away at the age of 77. We'll take a short break and then we'll continue the paper review.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Listen back to your favourite News Talk shows at newstalk.com and on the News Talk app.
Okay, the secret is out. Kildare Village is having a private sale that ends this Sunday. That means saving an extra 20% on participating brands, but to get those savings, you must become a privileged member at kildarevillage.com. It's a private sale, don't forget. So get online and be in line for some pretty remarkable extra savings. Only during the private sale. Only at Kildare Village, where there's something extraordinary every day. Terms and conditions apply.
The wait is over. The shopping event of the year is here. Get Black Friday discounts today. Like the Samsung Galaxy 7-inch tablet for just €99, our lowest price ever. Or get the Lenovo Intel laptop for just $199, saving you €80. And at Harvey Norman, we've matched all competitors' Black Friday prices, so no need to shop around. Don't wait until Black Friday. Now's the time to buy, in store or online. Harvey Norman Black Friday sale.
The new Mercedes-Benz X-Class pickup has arrived. The first premium brand pickup with a starting price of just €39,950. The Mercedes-Benz X-Class is available to order now. Find your nearest X-Class dealer at mercedes-benz.ie. Recommended retail price includes VAT, excludes dealer-related charges.
Yes, it's getting colder and darker, but the Aer Lingus Happy Winter deals are here. Why not escape the winter gloom with a visit to one of our European city and sun destinations, such as Toulouse, Bordeaux or Santiago de Compostela. Flights to Europe start at just $29.99 one way, including taxes and charges. So you can swap winter chills for holiday thrills with a great value getaway. Smart books now and looks forward to a happy winter. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
Winter weekends are for family. Bring yours together with this week's Sunday Independent. Rachel Allen bakes cookies with the kids. Tommy Tiernan meditates on how to be a father. And in life, Colin Farrell, The Edge, Donald Gleeson, Laura Whitmore and Johnny Sexton talk about childhood illness. Plus, there's a €10 Dunn's voucher for every reader. The Sunday Independent. The complete read. T's and C's apply.
At Leia Healthcare, we understand that you have a lot to juggle. So as your health and wellbeing partner, we've introduced our 24/7 mental wellbeing support program. Confidentially speak about things like your mental health, financial and legal issues, and work-related stress or anxiety. With access for all Leia Healthcare members to 5 face-to-face counselling sessions on applicable schemes. Because it's good to live. Leia Healthcare. Looking after you always.
Terms and conditions apply. Insurance provided by Ellipse Insurance Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare and Leia Life, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Programme available from purchase or on next renewal.
This National Fraud Awareness Week, get fraud smart and protect your business from financial fraud. Every day, businesses like yours are targeted by increasingly sophisticated financial scams, invoice fraud, email and phone scams, malware. For simple, practical advice on how to prevent your business from falling victim to these types of scams, visit fraudsmart.ie and download the brochure Protect Your Business from Fraud. FraudSmart is an initiative developed by Banking and Payments Federation Ireland.
The wait is over. The shopping event of the year is here. Get Black Friday discounts today, like the Candy Ceramic Hob for just €184, saving you over 10%. Or get the Siemens Induction Hob for just €324, saving you €285. And at Harvey Norman, we've matched all competitors' Black Friday prices, so no need to shop around. Don't wait until Black Friday. Now's the time to buy, in store or online. Harvey Norman Black Friday Sale.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
You're very welcome back. We're reviewing the Sunday Papers. You're very welcome back. We're reviewing the Sunday Papers. We have Ryle Nugent in studio. We have Brendan O'Brien as well. We've been talking a lot about the rugby, as you might imagine, for the first half an hour or so. It's right across the papers. We're going to get to Andy Lee. There's talk of Martin O'Neill. A few nice GAA pieces we're hoping to hit as well. Mark O'Shea talking about his retirement in his piece in the Mail. Eamon McGee interview as well. There's a piece on the Katie documentary. Richard Scudamore and his 5 million. If I'm bugging you, you'll enjoy Paul Kimmage and his assessment of the Off the Ball Roadshow. Questions not quite where they should have been, so it's all there. Text in, hey guys, I've read the New Zealand media reaction to last night's match. Bowden Barrett comes in for huge criticism and the mistakes they made. Nothing though about Ireland's great performance. The big thing is they are happy this result happened so they can improve for the World Cup, says Dermot in Galway. I'm sure that's a sense of it. I certainly saw lots of statements in the New Zealand press that Ireland are the best team, and I suppose we're all a bit insular.
Totally.
If we lost, we wouldn't be talking about how great New Zealand are, really. We'd be talking about our mistakes. It's just the nature of the business.
The only week that I covered the away team like I did today in any sport is New Zealand when you come to town.
Yeah.
Other than that, the opposition might not get a mention.
No, it's navel gazing.
Totally.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I hear where he's coming from, but I had a quick look at the New Zealand Herald last night and a couple of other sites, and they very clearly covered what Steve Hansen had to say about Ireland and being the best team in the world and all the rest of it. But I do think one of the things we haven't touched on is final word on this from me anyway. I think that in some ways Hansen will, at the back of his head, will give his players and his squad a wake-up call that they probably needed. Going through an entire season and going into a World Cup without really believing and knowing that there's a couple of teams there that can beat you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's any good for anyone.
No. I know there's a few pieces, Hugh Farrelly touches on it, a few others about does it suit the Irish psyche to be favourites and have this almost bullish attitude about things, and the Irish negativity in me was thinking, well, we'll never beat them twice in a row.
Nobody does, that's the thing.
But I guess it's so far away, it probably has no concrete bearing and things. It's fine, in a sense, I wasn't really going to, when I was coming in this morning, you're kind of trying to second guess the papers, what's in it, and you figured that we would be much thought on Martin O'Neill, and I guess there's probably a fatigue on that, so we won't spend too long on it. Everybody, you'll be glad to hear. I guess it's worth touching on, Ryle, to make the point, and you certainly made it, that this is definitely ratcheting up in terms of the pointedness of criticism coming O'Neill's way. This is a general agreement. This thing either needs to come to an end, or certainly this really now is not working. This is more than a blip.
Yeah, I mean, look, it has been the topic of conversation and written word for many months now. But I just noticed today, in amongst the significant rugby coverage, that there are some pointed
football coverage.
No, but in amongst all the rugby coverage, there is this sharp edge on the football coverage that hasn't been there. At least I haven't picked up on it quite as much as maybe I should have. I like
that said, Frano on Martin O'Neill would be worth a read.
Like Roy Curtis in the Sunday World. I mean, tactically, Ireland are inarticulate, as clueless and as crude as a buffalo herd handed a chessboard and asked to execute a 4-pawn gambit. Philip O'Neill in the Irish Mail. A chill northeaster was blowing into our house bay last night, carrying the first wintry icy fingers. In some ways, it could be a metaphor for Martin O'Neill's tenure as the Irish manager. From being in a position where his record as manager was being compared favourably to that of Jack Charlton's, Ireland's most successful, he has found himself in retreat and at times in absolute denial. Now Ireland are in a deep hole devoid of spark and goals. Soon hope may abandon this team.
It was interesting. Quinn went on to say people might be interested. Robbie Brady was back, and he says Brady was back in the beat for the first time in a year. Didn't set the EV on fire. He surely, says Philip Quinn, he surely didn't deserve the severe dressing down he reportedly got from a member of the coaching staff after the game, which is no fun. And that ties in, I think, with Kevin Kilban's overall.
Yeah, exactly. Like a happy camp.
That's Kevin's, this Ireland team is not a happy one, and the lines in it from Kevin, like the joy and enthusiasm seems to have been sucked out of this team. The fear is evident in their football. I don't see anyone prepared to take a risk. If our goalkeeper is man of the match by some distance for a home fixture with Northern Ireland, then surely there is something seriously wrong. It's the collective edge to what's been said that kind of drew me to it across all the pieces in the papers today, and you know what, it's a really hard one. I don't know where the FAI go with this, because there's no question that the results aren't what they should be or what everybody expects them to be, and yet I have this feeling that Martin O'Neill is the wrong manager with this group of players, where he might have been the right manager at a different time with a different group of players. And you look at this group of players and you kind of feel, what might a Brian Kerr or what would a Stephen Kenny do with this group? And then you wonder what maybe Martin would have done with let's call it a more golden generation of talent. But I think the FAI are caught between a rock and a hard place. It's going to cost an inordinate amount of money to ship Martin and his backroom staff on and bring in a new group, and the FAI are not flush. So where do you go? And for me, I'm wondering what the tipping point is. Like
Stephen Hunt says, if they lose heavily in Denmark tomorrow, I fear for O'Neill and his coaching staff. So that's certainly one mark you could put down. Tomorrow is important for them.
The problem is that Denmark are qualified, so they could play half a team. Then you could have a very unlikely 1-0 Ireland win with a Shane Duffy header in the 85th minute, or more likely in the 3rd minute, and then it
changes nothing really.
Changes nothing, but changes everything. And then the problem with that is you have Martin O'Neill coming back out after the game, and he can say, "We've just won 1-0. What's the problem here? That's the result. We're going forward." And the problem with Martin O'Neill's Ireland team is, not only are we seeing the same things all the time, we're hearing the same thing all the time.
Actually, the Robbie Keane stuff bugs Kevin Kilban. He opens his piece with that.
It's ridiculous.
The wistful glances back to Robbie.
And it's the wistful glances back to everything, Joe. Even the point here in Philip Quinn's piece in the Mail, quoting O'Neill, "I recall losing friendly matches before the start of the season with a really decent club, Nottingham Forest in brackets, and not being able to win a game. And you're like, don't mention Nottingham Forest, don't mention Wycombe Wanderers, Celtic, any of these guys. We don't need to hear it. Are the players? Is this what the players are hearing as well? You know, in my day kind of stuff. It's the same thing he's saying all the time. It is a broken record. The games we're seeing, same thing all the time. There's nothing on the pitch that suggests anything that is the first cousin of an upward curve.
If you were to look for something where you would say, well, somebody's making, not excuses for him, but arguing his case to a point, Paul McGrath says, oh God, I feel the pain of the Irish supporters who sat through Thursday night's game. And he says, we've no attacking flair or talent, just 2 goals in the last 5 matches. He says it's becoming a mess for the Irish team. But he does say, he does put it at the players, to be honest. He says Coleman is the only one who would get in the 2002 World Cup team, or 2002 World Cup squad, I think he means. He says team, but maybe he means squad, I'm not sure. So, you know, he's saying Martin's job is to make the best of what we've got. He cannot be asked to make players better in the few rush days of training before an international. Martin may suggest a couple of things to the players, but they have to do it for themselves in between the long gaps in international call-ups. And there is stock in that argument for sure. I suppose the contrast might be drawn with Northern Ireland, who don't have an array of talent, and yet they seem to have more of a plan and place than we do, you know. And so that what Northern Ireland did on Thursday night, 60% possession and a real kind of pattern of play, that goes against what McGrath's saying here.
Well, McGrath also, in fairness too, sorry Brendan, he said Martin O'Neill, you can knock manager Martin O'Neill all you want, and he is struggling to get the best out of our lads.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
And I think that, we've had, how long is this debate going on? that's it in a nutshell. Everybody believes. Now, no one knows because you're not standing they're not in the changing room, but the white noise around this is consistent, which is not the greatest group of players Ireland have ever had by a long chalk, but not getting the best out of them, and that's the manager's issue.
It's a stunning contrast in Irish sport, arguably the two biggest teams now, the rugby versus the football, the level of preparation, the detail, the process, the strength of squad versus the football team. It's obviously completely different environment.
But if you look at it from a coaching point of view, Joe Schmidt is clearly getting the best out of those Irish players.
That's the point,
He's getting the best out of it. Steve Hansen actually intimated during the week that he has done a brilliant job with Ireland despite the players.
Did he say that? Yeah.
I'll send you the quote on later on. He basically suggested that, and he went back to his own time with Wales in the mid-noughties when they lost 11 tests in a row, record. And he compared that Wales team and his experiences there to this Ireland team. He says, it's like when I was at Wales, sometimes you want to play a certain way, but you can't with the players you have. And he said, what Joe has done is worked around that.
Well, there's no doubt it's a less champagne style of rugby than what he had at Leinster.
Totally.
Sure, but I think, look, for me, these things are cyclical. We're a small country with small playing pools relative to, if you're Germany or France, you may go through a batch of players in your international soccer team, but chances are that bad batch is still going to get you to the quarterfinal of a World Cup or maybe even better. When we're a small country with a small pool, whether that be soccer or rugby, from an international sports perspective, and you're going to have moments, and like when Ireland's soccer team were on its absolute high and through the 80s and 90s, the rugby team were on its knees, and I know it was a different era and different time and it wasn't professional, but it still was on its knees and others were way ahead. So I think you can start pointing and saying the rugby guys are doing it right and the soccer guys are doing it wrong. I'm not suggesting you're saying that quite as directly as that, but I think you have to look at the hardware that the coaches have available, and no matter what way you look at it, and you can say Joe Schmidt has done, and he's done remarkably well, but he does have the hardware. He does
have the hardware, but purely on a coaching level, he's getting the best out of his players, and Martin O'Neill is not.
No argument.
Nobody expects. Everybody knows. There's nobody out there who thinks there's something, there's an alchemy to be done here where suddenly we're going to be getting to a World Cup quarter-final with these players. But there's a base level that they're not hitting. That's all anybody is saying. There's no hyperbole here. There's nobody getting the run of ourselves. Everybody understands the limitations. And if people could see the Republic of Ireland playing in the manner that Northern Ireland played on Thursday night, I think the vast majority of people would be happy.
Yeah,
that's simple.
I think that's fair. So we'll see what happens tomorrow in our house. Various other pieces then.
I love that.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Can't get away
it's broadcasting nightmare, isn't it? GAA pieces then. Mark O'Shea opens with a hell of a line. If there is such a thing as male menopause, I just may be going through it. All week I'm getting flashbacks. Some which have left me in tears of laughter, others wet-eyed with sadness. 1 minute relief, the next regret. And he's talking about his retirement after playing with on Gaeltacht for 21 years. Obviously he's been out of the Kerry side for a while. And he's talking about retiring from the club. He says, as Terence Sambo McNaughton, the former Antrim hurler, put it best recently, He said, your county teammates are the lads you invite to your wedding. Your club mates end up shouldering your coffin at the church. And he's talking really about being overwhelmed with various things. The sadness of retiring, the sense that the GA gets so much right. He says, this week I've been overwhelmed by that truth, for all the ills of the GA. And there are many genuine ones.
Excuse me.
It's just been such a positive time for him. So many messages from various people. And talks about why he's retiring, kind of funny, the legs are still solid, the engine is good, and I could run all day for you, but the speed has emptied out of them. Is a great line, and talked about being targeted by the young whippersnappers. And he said, if there was a moment that sealed in my mind the race was run, it was when we ended up playing Dr. Croats and I ended up marking the gooch. Here's the thing. I was relieved because the alternative was that I would be faced with some young sprint-crazed buck. But when you're relieved to be marking the gooch, then you're running out of options. Great line. Here's the thing. I bet Gooch was glad to see me as well. Both of us got to play at our own pace. So that's it. There are no regrets, just sadness.
I loved that piece. I have to say it was my favourite piece from the
Really,
papers
yeah?
today. Yeah, I really did. It's rare that you could feel the emotion of the guy that was writing it, and
raw,
it feels honest, and it feels raw, and it's clearly genuine, and it struck a chord with me. It was my favourite piece of the morning. I thought so. You picked out the lines that I
They jump out, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, I just loved that. So I knew I was being targeted. As the goal for the opposition manager was to pair me off with some jet-heeled kid. So this year I became a utility player, marking space rather than choking on their fumes.
Yes.
Lovely line.
He says you go from chief firefighter to fire prevention officer.
Yeah.
It's a less glamorous role.
Yeah.
Did finish off by saying that the manager of the B team has texted him asking, would you be interested in maybe, don't go just yet, Mark.
Yeah.
I guarantee he'll be back playing B football next year.
It's a nice wistful touch at the end of it as well. He's talking about the family tradition with An Gaeltacht as well, and how his brother Fergal's two sons are still going to play, but how himself and Tomás now are based in Tralee in Cork, and it just strikes you as sad. It's, I suppose, very typical of modern Ireland, isn't it? Lots of people moving up to the big smoke, or whatever form that takes, and just the dilution of the rural game just struck me of all the brilliant familial links we have in the GA, the Shays is just resonant with
it's royalty,
that party,
really.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just kind of a little... I found it a little bit sad, but it is what it is.
It is sad.
Oh, it is sad, but I agree with you.
Sad,
yeah, that's the pure emotion of what comes off the page is it's got to strike a chord with you.
Yeah, definitely.
If you have any semblance of emotion in your system, it's going to hit you.
You're allowed to find this sad.
It's okay, that's fine. It's a little bit uncomfortable saying that. Can I say this?
Yes. You have a piece there by Shane McGrath, Brendan?
Yeah, this just struck me because we also singled out a couple of, it's that time of year, obviously. It seems like an age ago since the inter-county scene finished.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it seems like 6 months ago at this stage. And what we have in its place are the club championships, which are shown brilliantly on TG Car. But we're at a stage now where we're saying, why isn't there Sunday night highlights package for this? There's definitely a market out there that people would pay for this. You have features on Ballygunner from Waterford today. You have a feature with Eamon McGee that we're going to talk about. You have a feature on Owen Rua up in Coleraine, which Mick Clifford does in the Mail, which is excellent.
Excellent.
And Shane McGrath makes the point here in his column, GA must forget about these wild goose chases. And this is about the Fenway Park Classic, obviously in Boston this weekend, and the game between Galway and Kilkenny in Sydney last weekend.
I didn't even know they were on.
There you go. And it's a point that's been made before. Shane makes it very, very well. He says, why are we promoting these games abroad when Ulster and Connacht are wastelands for our national sport? But just on the whole coverage of things, he makes a point, and more pertinently still, they should not be soaking up coverage and energies that should be redirected to the problems that are palpable within Gaelic games. It really is. It's this outward focus. I realise there's a case for both, that one doesn't have to exclude the other, but it looks bad with the GA at this stage when you've got a club championship in hurling and football at the moment that is just awash with stories, and the Eamon McGee one is a very, very good example of it.
Yeah, what's Eamon talking about then?
Can I just pick up on that?
Yeah.
Because I think the point is well made, and I think Shane makes the point extremely well. But I don't necessarily know I agree fully with him. I see where he's coming from, but I think you've got to factor in other things as well, like which is the diaspora to a certain amount. I think you've got to focus in, like, part of this is rewarding players, and let's not pretend otherwise. From my perspective, it is the ability to and that has to have its place, and I think you dismiss that completely, and you possibly create another set of problems that you're going to have on a domestic front. So in fairness to the GAA on this one, and I absolutely think Shane's made the point clearly, concisely, and accurately. Still think it's not just quite as clear cut as saying you shouldn't be doing this. I think there is a merit and an understandable merit. Whether there's too much of it is where I'd be asking the question.
Yeah, okay. That's a fair point. Eamon McGee, you mentioned, was good.
Yeah, very good. I mean, this comes coincidentally, I'm sure, on the back of, in the Examiner yesterday, Declan Bogue did a very good interview with Kevin Cassidy. Who was,
I've liked it, and I want to
have
really
a good read.
Look forward and sit down.
Really good.
Yeah.
Kevin Cassidy, for people who don't know, was famously evicted from the Jim McGuinness's Donegal squad a few years ago for taking part in the book that Declan Bogue, the journalist, wrote.
Fairly innocuous comments as well.
Yes, but in Jim McGuinness's world at the time, he broke the trust, he broke the bond, the bonds, the omerta that they'd all agreed to.
And Declan Bogue was, if we're using the word evicted, Jim McGuinness wouldn't continue his press conference after winning the All-Ireland final. I mean, you would think of old moments to maybe say, let's let bygones be bygones.
I've forgotten that, actually.
Yeah, he wouldn't continue if Declan Bogue was in the room.
Yeah, so Kevin Cassidy talked very well about how he doesn't regret the decision at all. He doesn't feel that he's lost out on anything. Well, he doesn't feel, wistful about losing out on All-Ireland medals.
I don't believe that.
Well, and Declan goes into that with him. So again, read that interview. I'd advise anybody online. It's really, really good. But he talks about his friendship with Eamon McGee in yesterday's paper as well. And Eamon McGee talks about his friendship with Kevin here. And one line just jumps up at you about, because they're club mates, obviously, they're on the Donegal panel.
Of course,
he says,
okay.
I honestly don't think we will be best buds again, but we're well on the way to healing that hurt. And that's the line that just jumps out at you.
Wow.
These are guys who were boyhood friends, that soldier together for club and county, and even though they're at a stage in the relationship where they've made up to a certain extent, it's clearly it's never going to be the same again.
Why would those two have fallen out in the first place?
I think it was because, I don't want to misquote anybody here now. I think it was because that there wasn't a support for Kevin Cassidy at the time. I stand corrected on that they took Jim McGuinness's side and said, look, this is unfortunate, but this is the way it is, we all agreed to this or whatever. Please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody on that.
We'll double check it outside.
Yeah. But so that it was from this whole issue that the friendship collapsed, basically.
I'm sure that was, in one way or another, that must have been.
And now it's coming back, and
it's hard to say we'll never be quite best buds again.
I mean, that's something to say, isn't it? I mean, they're in their late 30s, I'd imagine, I mean, to say that and put it down on paper. I mean, Eamon McGee is a very interesting guy in social activism, and he talks about politics, so there's a lot in the interview. But he talks about then how Kevin Cassidy had twins 8 years ago. He's got twins now, and that's helping the bond. Kevin is telling them, look,
some commercial sponsor will come along and they'll get on. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I don't ever see it happening, but it's a really good interview, and it goes into politics. He talks about how the Labour Party went into government, and sold so many of their principles. Yeah. So this is not your archetypal. I mean, Eamon McGee is a guy who's been in the papers a lot. He's a really, really interesting guy.
Owen Sheehan in record time has dug up a quote from McGee. Now, it goes back to the Irish Daily Star in 2016, but I'm sure his version of events is similar enough to Declan Bogue's. When Bogue's book came out, it was so hard for me to back Kevin up. I just got back into the squad. Was I going to jeopardise my own position? But I know Kevin was very hurt that myself and Neil, his club men, didn't back him up. There was a time when things were very, very raw. We were in the local pub one night. The whole thing came up. There was a bit of aggro. We had to be separated, which was lucky for me, as I'd have had the head kicked off me. Eamon McGee. So that's terrible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Like, I mean, that can happen from something that they both loved all their lives. And it does happen. It's life. It's human relationships and stuff happens, but it's a terrible shame. And that quote about we'll never be best buds again.
That's and I've made light of that. I shouldn't have. In truth, like it is. It's because you forget it's neighbours and friends. And it's at the heart of what they are and who they are. And
O'Driscoll and Umaga were not best friends.
Correct. And I was being glib, and I shouldn't have been. Sorry. I actually want to withdraw that. That was smart.
Well, you can't. It's radio.
Okay. I tell you,
we're going to put a short clip on Twitter of you just making that joke, and then leave out the apology.
You know what's interesting is there's another piece on that. That's on page 74 of the Mail. On page 75 is the Owen Rua piece by Mick Clifford, and I was drawn.
I must apologise. I didn't get to this, so you'll have to take.
So it just talking about Owen Rua lead the way with an open door and welcome mat in a unionist-dominated town, and it just it lays out the challenges that they've faced since their inception since they were founded back in 1957, and some of the things that they've had to go through. You know, in some ways it's a story that's been told in different clubs before, but I was just taken by the, you know, this, I'm struggling for a word, but the word maturity is the one that comes, that life has moved on so much and there is such a different attitude, and you feel comforted by the attitude that's there, because when pressed on it, you know, the quote is, you can focus on flags and anthems, but the reality is we have players from both communities, and what brings them here is the games, and no one asks them what school they go to or what church they go to. We know who we are. I think that's powerful.
Brilliant.
Like, that's really, really powerful. That's what drew me to that, and it wouldn't have been a piece that I would have normally been drawn to, but it kind of gives the very best of what's there in the club game, doesn't it?
I was half wondering, would anyone get into the booing of the anthem at the Aviva on Thursday, which was
that's what drew me. I think
dreadful.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Honestly, bunch of idiots, really, all of them.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of reinstates your enthusiasm for re-engaging in that sort of thought process, because what happened was awful the other night, and that is really what should be happening, and it's great to see it.
It's been a positive story for them. It's worked out well.
I mean, just a bit of background on that, because Ryle, you came up with the best quote in it, and just the background on it. On St. Valentine's Night 1975, 23-year-old club member Brendan Doherty was shot dead by the UVF on the way home from a university dance. His brother Chris was blinded for life in the same attack. And on the greatest night in Derry's GAA history, as the county celebrated an All-Ireland win in 1993, another of their players had his house burned out. Tragedy averted only after his family crawled through a bathroom window to escape. So again, it puts it into perspective of the troubles and everything that went around them. And yet at the end of it, it can wrap up like that. We don't have any flags here. We don't have any anthems.
Right.
None. Gone.
Club referred to as Coleraine. The reality is that it's closer to Portstewart, while nearby Portrush completes the triangle from which the club draws its players. By tradition, it's the celebrated soccer town, and politically, Coleraine is a cold house for the GAA.
Right.
Just shows you what you can do.
Yeah, great.
Lovely piece.
That seems
really
that's
good
right beside the McGee piece. So page 74 and 75 of the Mail are worth stopping on if you have it at
by
home.
Micheál Clifford.
You know what? I have to say the Mail is
good today.
Is good.
Yeah,
very good
today. Yeah. Was there a last GA piece, or was Katie's documentary? We haven't touched on Andy Lee as well. We could do Katie and Andy together as we begin to wrap things up. I think that was most of the GA ones.
Yeah, I think
pretty much was. Yeah.
So Barry White in the Sunday Business Post, we were just sort of saying before in there, pops up every now and again. I presume Barry is interviewing non-sports people as well at times.
Chief features writer.
Yeah, but anytime he turns his hand to sport, he's done some brilliant ones. There was a Joe Brolly interview a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago now, which was just fantastic, and he'll pop up every now and then with a brilliant sports interview. He's got Andy Lee today. I mean, I think the word gent is most applicable to Andy, really. So he talks about Lee and kind of just... it's more of a... It's a very feature piece. You know, some of these are real Q&A. This is more of a taking you through Andy's career. I think for people who mightn't be as familiar with his career, as we should be, because lots of us aren't. A lot of us missed a lot of the fights. They were on at strange times. Even Lee himself, or White writes of Lee. Andy's surprised to find how popular he is in Ireland. Perhaps that's because he spent so many years fighting all over the US, thousands of miles away from friends, family, and Irish broadcasters. So there is that sense in this piece of bringing you up to date with the various big markers in his life. And he says, Andy Lee at one stage, I never played the card of being a loudmouth, being a talker, running down my opponents, and maybe because I didn't do that, my career suffered, because I probably would have got bigger paydays, more fights if I'd been on Twitter running down my opponents, slagging people off and calling people out. You know, people would have turned up to see the freak show. But he says now that he's retired, he's reaping the benefits, says White, because I never burned bridges. I didn't sell out in a sense. And you always got that sense with Lee across his career. He was not sacrificing his integrity, the person he wanted to be, which I'm sure promoters said, look, you got to kind of play the game a little bit here. He never did, and it probably cost him financially.
Yeah, look, I thought it was a really, really good article, and it just didn't take you through the professional side. It took you through the personal side and who he is. And I think, you know, you touched on it. A lot of people don't really understand, recognise, or know what Andy Lee achieved. But the commonality is, anytime you mention Andy Lee's name, you get a positive response, which is a rarity in sport. Never mind in boxing. You know, here's a nice line from it. It's uncommon for boxers to show the insight to understand themselves, to speak honestly, and without a reflexive effort to shield their vulnerabilities. It makes Andy Lee, who thinks before he speaks and speaks with care, articulate and honest. And that is a rare thing indeed. And I think that's a really nice line.
It's a great insight into Andy, and it's a great insight into professional boxing and just the struggle.
Yeah.
And there's a great line about, there are a lot of guys who are professional boxers and they're not making any money.
Yeah.
They're selling tickets to pay for the fights they're having, and they're basically funding their own fights. And he says, I don't know why they box professionally. And he says, well, I do. They want the notoriety, they want to have the fame, they want to be able to say, I'm a professional boxer, and tell their mates. And that's at that level. And Andy got to the other level where he was world champion. And even then, he talks about how hard it was to get a mortgage when he came home.
Yeah,
this is a guy who's a world champion.
Yeah,
and it's a really interesting little bit on it here where he talks about he could have taken several fights and cashed in, but he knew it wasn't what he was preparing for, and that it wouldn't be the payday to set him up for life. Not clearly that he was set up for life anyway, although he would have made a bit of money out of it.
Yeah.
He says it would have got $300,000, maybe $400,000, and that sounds great, but when you take your tax 33% in America, take out your expenses, you're left with $200,000, and that's the end of your career.
Yeah, that would have been his payoff, effectively.
You know, after everything he put into, and the start of this piece is all about what it is to step in the ring and knowing for 30 minutes you're going to get the head punched off you.
Yeah.
And just to have that at the end of it, that's not going to set you up for a hell of a long time.
Yeah, he was saying all his money now is in property where I can't touch it. And
there is a good thing, I think is his line.
Yeah, because he did talk, there is a kind of macho, big spending element in boxing, the best clothes and the fast
and he
cars
fell
and
into that, he says, in the early days. I'm really looking forward to reading the book.
Apparently it's great.
I have
apparently it's really great.
I'm looking forward to
Typical business post, let's talk about money and your investments. But it's interesting. People do wonder about how someone like Lee, can you retire for life now? Can you not? How does it work?
Well, so how does Lee define himself now that he's no longer a boxer? I don't have an answer because I don't know. But I don't know, I need to have an answer at this point. It's less than a year since I retired, and that was my whole life. So I'm still finding my way. I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a panic. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm completely fine with that.
There's a very good segue here to the Katie Taylor piece in the Sunday Times, if you're interested. Katie talks about in the documentary, Mick Foley mentions it again, about how she couldn't even make a stir fry for herself when she landed in, was it Connecticut she ended up in?
Yeah.
And Andy had a very different situation when he went pro with Emmanuel Stewart, and he stayed in his house for 7 years. And just a lovely insight into the relationship that they had. Throughout the day, I would make a number of small sacrifices for him that other fighters wouldn't do because of who he was. Just cleaning the kitchen, cooking him a breakfast. If I was doing my laundry, I'd put his on, just stuff like that, folding his clothes. Just small things, and he appreciated them. Going down to the shop. So a lovely little insight into the father-son relationship that was there.
Yeah.
And then you have Katie, who was scratching her head about a stir fry in the kitchen and cutting garlic on a tea towel. Totally different, yet the same people.
And I guess, and Mick talks to Ross Whitaker here, who's made the film. She's come to terms about losing the father figure as well. That's a big part of this documentary. I still haven't got around to bloody seen it. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. Well, I had the privilege of seeing it about 4 months ago before I left my previous employment. And I got to see it. So I haven't seen the final cut, but I've seen a large part of it. And I think it's, you know what? Documentaries for me, TV documentaries are ones that are cinematic documentaries on sports people. The ones that work best are the ones that don't work hard or feel like they're not working hard to get you to engage. They just point the camera and let it. And Ross Whitaker has done a fantastic job of doing the most important thing, which is getting the trust and the access. And when you've established the trust and the access, then if you're right about your subject, the rest should really take care of itself. And then it's up to good editors and good cameramen and women to give you the story as it unfolds. And I think Ross Whitaker's done a fantastic thing, because what it does is it just lets Katie be herself. And we don't know Katie. No one knows
not at all.
Katie.
No.
And what it does is give you, there's some wonderful scenes with her friends just sitting around a restaurant table, and the vulnerability is clear and exposed, and I think it's an incredibly brave thing for her to have done, and I think it was really well handled by the person she allowed to do it, and there's clearly a relationship there between the two of them, between the filmmaker and the subject, where there's a trust, and it doesn't do anything other than say, here she is, this is what she's done and where she's been and where she's going.
Watch.
Yeah. And Ross Whittaker mentions that it was a very different documentary to the ones he'd done before because of how quiet Katie is. It was just so much more softly, gave it a different feel. And just what struck me was, and I knew this, but when you see it in print, it makes you think, the camera crew were with her when she made her professional debut in November 2016. We're now in November 2018 and it's just out. So the length of time and that this process, you'll know all about that.
You
the
can
process,
see it.
I mean, they were embedded in the best sense of the word.
I often think of the, when you talk about Ryle, about just watching and letting the camera do something, the Tony McCoy documentary of his last year is sublime. And there's just images that are seared into your head. Like there's one where he sits in the changing room and he's just sitting there doing nothing, just half kind of looking around and half, doing his shoelaces, and the camera just stays on him, just watching him. And it's compelling. You can dress things up.
Because what we forget is we're intrigued with their normality.
They're mundane, totally.
This is what I do. So what's the big deal? When you've been doing it for 15, 20 years, you kind of think, this is what I do. I go to work, I do this, and I write 7,000 winners, and everybody, and you sit in awe with your jaw going, how do you recover from having all those pieces of your anatomy stitched back together again in McCoy's case? So McCoy and Ted have been standout docs for me.
Yeah, and it jumped to mind because he has a certain quietness and stillness about his demeanour as well. And I think a good documentary maker will slow down to their pace and suck you, almost calm you down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Their level,
Ross Whittaker's done a terrific job.
Yeah.
It's, what I would encourage anybody that's got any interest at all in sport of any description
to go and see it.
Yeah. And on a human level, it's really interesting as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Actually, sorry, I just skipped by a GA piece I've highlighted all over. We won't get time to talk about it in much depth, but if we were mentioning GA features, Ballygunner are playing today against a Piercing, and Wayne Hutchinson, who people may vaguely remember, he was in and around the Waterford squad. It's just a brilliant interview, effectively, about his battle with depression for his entire adult life. Absolutely dreadful stuff, and he's written blogs about it. And it's with Dennis Walsh, who, as you might imagine, has done a really brilliant job. So it's well worth checking out, even if the game has happened already. It's not really time sensitive, but it's really, really good as well. And there was one last one. If we're talking about Andy Lee getting a payout of about 200 grand, 5 million for the already quite well paid Richard Scudamore had a lot of people just shaking their heads at the corporate world. You were kind of looking at Scudamore and his replacement as well.
Yeah, I looked at David Walsh did a piece on the back of the Sunday Times. In fact, it is, as he reaches for it quickly. Sorry about this. It takes up a lot of the back page in the Sunday Times, and David Walsh is. I think his central point is he shouldn't be taking this. Richard Scudamore's 5 million golden handshake is a gift to which he is not entitled. If he keeps the cash, the Premier League chief badly diminishes his legacy. And he goes on in the piece to point out that somewhere in the region of, consider what we have just witnessed. An administrator spends 19 years working for the Premier League. He does an excellent job for which he receives cumulative earnings of about £27 million sterling, with a sizable amount coming in performance-related bonuses. We can presume he travels first class and enjoys the privileges of a gracious, generous, I should say, expense account. And the point that he's making, David Walsh is making, is this 5 million is absolutely unnecessary. On top of that, the man was doing the job that he was being paid incredibly well for. I don't think there's any doubt that what Scudamore has achieved with the Premier League, it is mind-blowing. His ability to reinvent it and to make sure that when the big paydays came, those media rights deals came along, that he had enough competition in the market to make every day look like they were competing for property back in the boom times.
I know.
And he, I think he was very good, but I think like all people that are very good, they'll say they got a little bit of luck along the way. The arrival of BT into the market made Sky very cautious. The arrival of the Amazons and the Facebooks and BN Sport sort of started to show up in Asia, and there were rumblings about whether they would come into the UK and the money that was behind them. So Scudamore played all of those cards immaculately when he needed to play them, and the revenues just went up and up and up and up. And I'm looking to see that I'm just in his time. The TV under the league's outgoing boss Richard Scudamore. This is in the Irish Mail on Sunday. Under the league's outgoing boss Richard Scudamore, TV money from home and abroad combined has grown from about 200 million in 1999 to 3 billion a year now.
Yeah.
You know, and he's been rewarded royally for
doing
it. What's interesting and Walsh's piece is basically, Richard, don't ruin your legacy by taking this 5 million. Donate it to a grassroots charity. Do something with it. Give it back. You don't need to be, and you shouldn't be taking it.
The 5 million, by the way, is coming from each of the clubs, throwing together 250 grand.
There is an element.
In the context of the clubs not even paying certain employees a living wage, that's been one of the big campaigns, that they can just rustle up 250 grand from the back of the couch.
This is mentioned just before you go on to Susanna Dinage, in David Walsh's piece. He mentions the Football Supporters Federation also expressed dismay, wondering how the payment could be signed off without notice when fans are repeatedly told there's no surplus money in the Premier League. And then further down, he's talking about how football's higher echelons have been stridently supportive. Not just Bruce Buck at Chelsea, but Tottenham's Daniel Levy, West Ham's David Gold. Both thought Scudamore fully deserved the money. And here's the line that got me. They convey no sense of seeing this as fans see it, acting almost as if it has nothing to do with football fans, which of course it doesn't. And that's the heart of the matter, really.
And it puts there's no question, and it puts the new woman in charge under unnecessary pressure from, not that she probably is going to be able to do anything about it, but she's going to be put in a position where she's going to be asked about it, and it starts her tenure in a circumstance where she's on the defensive, and no one wants to take on a big job where the first thing you're doing is explaining what the guy that left the office last just did.
And there's talk of Scudamore's embarrassment, which apparently had nothing to do with the figure, but the fact that
it's left to her.
It's taking the onus, the spotlight off his successor. No, I'll take the money, but just have a chat with Susanna as she comes in the door.
And there's a nice piece in the Mail on Sundays, the Irish Mail on Sunday as well, on the new woman who's taken over as the Premier League's chief, Susanna Dinage. So they're a piece really giving some background on her. I guess her most prominent, they say it here, her most prominent foray into sports rights was buying the European rights to the Olympics for Eurosport for 2018 to 2024, which was something of a coup at the time. And what challenge? I mean, I think it's been welcomed on every level. There's no but he's saying that this isn't the right woman for the job, and anything that I've read that this is the right person for the job, anywhere that I've read, when you put a new chief executive into a role that has been so dominated by one, normally everybody has opinion on the new guy or woman that's coming in, that they may or may not be the right person. I think that the sense is this woman's from a broadcast background, and the big revenues are in the broadcasting world for the Premier League, and therefore she has the pedigree to do it. But it's interesting in terms of the challenges that face her. The average age of match-going fans, the cost of ticket prices for fans, the safe standing of the games, horrible addiction to gambling advertising is something that they've outlined as a real challenge for her. Taking on agents, implementing VAR, dealing with Brexit, it's a
handful.
It's job.
It's a massive job, and I mean, arguably the biggest single job in terms of one of the most powerful jobs in sport. Let's leave it at that.
Sure, right, we've been going for well over an hour now. I think we come on at 1:30. I do just want to mention, by the way, page 5 of the Sunday Independent, so I'm not accused of not mentioning it. We did a road show on Tuesday night. Some of you may have heard it. Paul O'Connell, various others were there. Soft questions, hard questions. Now sponsors can heal all rifts. So Paul Kimmage definitely thought it was a bit too chummy for his liking. Talked about O'Connell being there, and obviously, well, it touches on the fact that South Africa and doping has been a big problem of late. And Paul writes, Paul O'Connell works with South African coaches in Paris. Where does he stand on the issues? Where did he stand on the signing of Gerben Grobler? It was easier to ask about his French, is a point he makes about the interview, and then certainly feels that the questioning of O'Driscoll and Umaga wasn't good enough. He was let off the hook by yours truly. Certainly thinks Keith Wood asked a very strong question of Marshall, and that's more what we should have had. So I didn't want to just skip over that entirely. I don't think it's fair on you guys to make you discuss it at length either, but it's on page 5 of the Sunday Independent if you want to have a read of that piece. So We are done. Thank you both for coming in. Really appreciate it. Brendan O'Brien from the Irish Examiner and Ryle Nugent, formerly of RTE Head of Sport, now with Channel 4 and continuing into the future a bit with Channel 4 and doing other bits and bobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Going well.
Okay.
Enjoying it.
Great.
Thank you for having me,
Okay.
Joe.
Appreciate it.
Cheers,
Thanks very
Joe.
much. Pay-per-view as ever brought to you with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Moncrief.
Somebody else just texted to say, how's your day going, Sean? ... Which I find slightly alarming. Because that sounds like there's going to be a follow-up text when I'm sitting in your house, wearing your underpants as a hat.
Moncrief.
Sponsored by Avantcard.
Weekdays from 2 p.m. on News Talk.
The new Mercedes-Benz Sprinter is here, starting from just €21,950. Book your test drive today at mercedes-benz.ie. The new Sprinter, 100% for you. Recommended retail price excludes taxes and dealer-related